Paul Scully is a Tory minister in the Department of Levelling Up, and in a recent town hall-style debate on the BBC, he got a bollocking from a lady in Sunderland.
Do you not actually feel ashamed that I seen a segment on the news last night and a 65-year-old woman was crying because she couldn't use a toaster? That lady over there's just been crying about the cost of living. Are you not ashamed of a party that our older generation are crying in fear of how they're going to survive and live? Are you not ashamed of that?
Look, it's not about being ashamed. It's about trying to work out how I can act. I really hate the fact that there are people suffering the way that you've just described. I didn't see that piece. And we've got to do something about it. We can't just sit there
You've been in power for 12 years. How can you say we're trying to do something? You've been in power for 12 years.
Kerry, what we haven't had in those 12 years, the lead up to those, we haven't had 2 years when we basically switched off the global economy.
We've had 12 years of austerity.
No, but we're literally every single country in the world turned off their economy effectively for 2 years. We spent £408
Can you just change the same drivel over and over again by blaming Ukraine and blaming Russia and blaming COVID? You have been in power for 12 years. 40% of children in the North East live in poverty. Are you not ashamed of that?
No, Kerry, what I'm saying to you is that we're trying to act targeting our support towards those people. Now, having just nearly half a trillion...
You need to be on a stage as a clown. You have not got a clue.
That was really, really refreshing to hear someone call out the Tories for always blaming someone else for the problems they created. The clip the lady is referring to is heart-wrenching, though. It was part of a report on ITV News.
On dark, pre-dawn streets illuminate the lights of those whose lives depend on hard work.
How many days a week are you doing this?
5.
5 days a week?
Yeah.
It's early. Every time this time of morning? Early starts?
Yeah, no, I've been here since about 4:20.
Liz Wright is 65 years old. She has known tough times before.
You always worked?
Yeah, I need to bring money in.
But nothing quite like this, where her bills are too big to bear, her wage as a cleaner barely buying the basics.
Toilet rolls once a month. The next month it'll be the soap powder, and the next month it'll be the coffee, where once upon a time you just went out and bought.
On good weeks, Liz gets the bus into work. On bad weeks, she has to walk, unable to afford the daily £4 fare. Today, she has the money, but the good weeks occur less often now. We meet Liz after her shift. The big worry, keeping her awake at night, is her new energy bill, which has just doubled.
You go in your account and it's £253 the one of a month.
Can you afford that?
Where am I going? Where I can't know.
Are you worried about any of this?
Yeah, really worried. Yeah. I don't want to burden my family. My daughter comes once a fortnight for something to eat, and she has to bring the food.
What change have you already made to try and cut back?
I've changed everything. I don't use my cooker very often. I don't have a toaster because I always use mine. So it's a luxury to have a piece of toast.
Really?
Really. Is it food banks next? Will I be able to keep the house? Because then I'm going to have to explain I've got no money and I can't live. That's
We'll give you a second.
Thanks.
It's just such a horrible situation. I mean, you've got someone 65, they're waking up really, really early to go to work, working really hard. I think at that age, you shouldn't have to have a job where you're waking up super early. If you've got a job, it should be part-time. I don't even think you need to say you've earned the right to have a nicer time. But if anyone has, it is someone who is of that age, going to work hard. Now, after all of that, I don't think, I think we should live in a society where no one of that age is forced to get up so early. You should have a job which is much, much more sociable, much more easygoing. But then even after that, she gets home and she can't afford to toast her bread. It's just living in a society, a wealthy society, by the way, where that is going on. And by the way, that's also been going on for years. right? I think it was important that the woman in that response to Paul Scully said, you've been doing austerity for 12 years. This isn't just a Putin thing. This isn't just a gas crisis. This isn't just coronavirus. You have been doing this for 12 years. And stories like that, I mean, thank God they're on the news more than they have been. And I think it is probably the case that more people than ever are experiencing that. But there are people who have been choosing, between heating and eating ever since austerity really started kicking in. You had people dying with empty stomachs, right? That was during the austerity years, especially people getting sanctioned, often for completely spurious reasons, end up completely destitute. But this situation here, I mean, I'm very, very glad it is now being given the platform it deserves. I think poverty was ignored, and not only ignored, but people in poverty were demonized for years in our press. Oh, these are the skivers. These are people who don't deserve anything. Now, I was reading an interesting tweet, actually, that I think some poverty campaigners sort of started saying, let's stop talking about people on benefits. Let's start talking about in-work poverty. Now, you might say, it's a shame that they had to do that because people out of work deserve our, solidarity just as much as people in work. But it does seem like that reframing maybe has made a bit of a difference. I'm not sure. I mean, Dahlia, I want your take on this. We can get carried away with these sort of Westminster wranglings. This is what really matters when it comes to Tory policy.
It's very difficult to say because, the media is such a fickle thing. I think even if we have this one glimmer of that, that woman, which I don't even know if they were aware that she was going to kind of bring up the fact that you can't just blame this on current crises, but actually that we have been living in this process of decaying the social safety net, of breaking it down, of making it clear to people that they no longer should expect to have basic rights like housing, like food, like clean water, guaranteed. That's been happening for a really long time. I'm not entirely sure that we can say that means that will continue. When watching that clip, it's like when you think of the broader context of the fact that BP literally tripled its profits in the last quarter. Shell has hit a record $11 billion in profit. Their profits literally doubled in the past year. So in whose name is this happening? In what name is this happening? And because at the same time, you have, a 65-year-old woman. It's not only like having to get up at 4 a.m. to walk to a job that she shouldn't need to have. She should have a pension. She should be able to, retire by that time. But also, cleaning is back-breaking work. It is not something that someone who's 65 years old should be having to do. And then coming home and, not being able to spend money on a bus fare or to have basic things. And then at the same time as that, you have the very Tory MPs that have enabled this system, that have architected this system, stigmatizing people, talking about people, living lavishly on benefits and, choosing to be poor because they're lazy. And, all of these things are incredibly, these are all processes that have been taking place for several years now, particularly accelerated under Tory austerity, but now have reached a real climax. I was in London the other day and I tweeted about this because I was just I just could not rid myself of the absolute just horror and anger that I felt. Obviously, London is a city that is eye-wateringly wealthy. There is wealth in this city that is absolutely obscene. And at the same time, I met an unhoused person who was literally crying in pain on the street because he had trench foot. This is the 21st century. Trench foot is a disease that people suffered from in the trenches of the First World War. And we're seeing it on the streets of one of the wealthiest cities in the world. I don't understand, when you talk about, we need to have these cuts or we need to spend government money better, whatever. I don't understand how anyone can look at the conditions that we see on the just when you walk out of your home on the streets of this city and around the country and think that there is any slack left in the system to cut in. And the final thing I want to say about that is, obviously, that man that I met, he was visibly and vocally in a deep amount of pain. And people were just walking past him. And the reason is because people are used to it. We are used to seeing that level of suffering in our society and considering it to be something that is normal. And, you know, not to get all kind of like woo woo and spiritual or whatever, but I really think that does like deep lasting damage to a society to normalize people being able to disembody themselves and kind of compartmentalize, which I'm sure many people do as a defense strategy. Although I do think it's kind of inexcusable to walk past someone like that and to just not even ask them if they're okay. But I imagine it's a defense strategy, but you have to kill something inside of yourself to be able to do that. And that is what we have collectively done as a society. And it's something that we've been pushed into doing as a result of this absolutely like morally bankrupt, disgusting government that we have had to endure for the past 12 years. You know, there is nothing that anyone can ever do to ever deserve living in the kind of indignity that we saw that woman experiencing, and that, you know, many of us see while walking the streets of this country every day.